Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that, well, it touches anyone who's ever tried to master a new language, especially when it comes to expressing themselves effectively on paper. We're talking about the art and the science of teaching writing in the English as a foreign language classroom, or EFL, as you'll hear us say. Our mission today, to pull out the most important insights from a comprehensive unit on EFL teaching. It's actually titled Writing in the EFL Classroom. We'll explore different philosophies for teaching writing, break down the actual writing process itself, and discover some best practices for evaluation and revision.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how these insights aren't just for educators. Not at all. If you're a language learner yourself, or maybe you support someone on that journey, understanding these approaches can profoundly change how you view and, well, how you actually practice writing. We're going to help you understand not just what these methods are, but crucially, why they matter for truly effective communication.
Yeah.
So, let's unpack this.
All right, let's do it. To kick us off, maybe let's zoom out a bit. Why is writing so foundational in the EFL classroom? What are all the different purposes it serves for a learner?
Well, fundamentally, writing is it's a form of art, isn't it? And communication, it's crossed cultural and national borders for centuries. And you think about the digital age now, the written word has the potential to literally last forever. It can reach generations into the future. So for those reasons alone, it's pretty clear why mastering written expression is essential.
That's a powerful way to put it, lasting forever.
Exactly. And in the EFL classroom specifically, writing acts like a multi-tool for language acquisition. It's a vital opportunity to practice and really cement newly learned language, solidify it. Beyond that, it helps students communicate for genuinely functional purposes.
Like what sort of things?
Things like explaining complex ideas, persuading an audience, making requests, or just describing their world. Skills useful in both personal and professional contexts. It also becomes a powerful way for students to share what they've learned, inside and outside the classroom. And maybe most importantly, sometimes it can be a deeply creative outlet. It motivates students to express feelings and ideas in completely new ways.
That makes perfect sense. It's like writing becomes the Swiss Army knife for language learning, covering so many bases. Now, when it comes to teaching this vital skill, our sources point to two main, quite distinct approaches: the product approach and the process approach. Let's start with the one that focuses, I guess, on the end result, the product approach. So this one, as the name suggests, is primarily focused on that final written text. What does this actually look like in a real classroom setting?
Right. In the product approach, the main goal is for students to accurately produce different types of texts. Think essays, letters, reports, that kind of thing. The teacher often presents really clear models of each text type, highlighting their typical features like structure or common phrases. And students learn these patterns and organizations to basically replicate a similar final product.
Okay.
So there's a strong emphasis on correct grammar, accurate sentence structure, and the mechanics of writing, punctuation, spelling, all about accuracy. The idea is really to minimize errors, either by providing strong templates or by very closely guiding the student's production, step by step.
So it sounds like it's largely about imitation and accuracy, getting it right. But what are the potential downsides or the criticisms of this method?
Well, focusing on text functions and accuracy is certainly logical. I mean, it makes sense on the surface. But the implementation of this approach has faced some pretty significant criticism over the years. Students can often feel excessively guided. They might become more passive participants with limited creative responsibility.
Ah, I see. Less room for their own voice.
Exactly. Classroom time tends to be dedicated to analyzing the form of those model texts rather than to the actual act of writing itself. There's also often a lack of clarity on what students are actually doing between getting the assignment and producing that final text. That middle part is a bit fuzzy. And a big question mark hangs over whether teacher feedback in this model truly impacts a student's future writing performance. Does it stick?
Yeah, that sounds like it could leave students feeling a bit like passive imitators rather than truly empowered writers. So if the product approach leaves some gaps, where do we go from there? Our sources suggest a complete rethink, a method that doesn't just tweak things but fundamentally flips the script. It focuses on the journey of writing. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. Tell us about the process approach.
Precisely. The process approach, it fundamentally shifts the focus for both teachers and students. It puts it squarely on the process of producing a piece of writing. The emphasis here is on helping students become good writers, not just producers of correct texts, but good writers. And it does that by guiding them through the same iterative steps that experienced writers naturally use.
Okay, so the final product still matters.
Oh, absolutely. The final product is still important, of course. It's the ultimate objective. But it's understood as the culmination of a gradual, evolving procedure, not the starting point. This whole approach is built on several key assumptions, which experts like Manchone and their colleagues highlighted back in 2005. For one, students get more genuine writing opportunities. They become less dependent on the teacher and often work collaboratively with peers,
More active then.
much more active. And a core belief is that writing is rewriting. It's not a one-shot deal. So students are typically encouraged, expected really, to produce multiple drafts, sometimes 3 or more. And they need support in 2 key forms. First, ample time to explore and just try out ideas without pressure. And second, constructive feedback from both the teacher and their peers on various aspects of their work as it develops.
So feedback isn't just at the end?
Not at all. It's part of the process. They're genuinely encouraged to see writing as a journey of discovery, finding their message as they go. And the teacher's role, this is key, it transforms. They move from being a linguistic judge, just marking errors.
The red pen wielder.
Aha, exactly. To being more of a reader who responds to the content, the message, supporting students to actively discover their own writing process. And in turn, the student's role also shifts dramatically. They go from merely mastering linguistic forms to freely offering their ideas, their experiences, attitudes, feelings, and they become active readers of others' writing too, giving feedback.
That sounds much more dynamic, definitely more empowering for the learner. So what does this journey of discovery actually look like? What are the typical steps involved in this process-oriented writing?
Well, our sources, drawing from experts like White and Arendt, they lay out a typical sequence that really highlights this iterative loop. It's not strictly linear, but there's a flow. It often starts with discussion and brainstorming, getting ideas flowing, then moves to making notes, maybe mind maps, and then something called fast writing, essentially getting ideas down quickly without censoring yourself.
It's just getting it out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
From there, students select their best ideas, maybe establish a clear viewpoint or angle, then they create a rough draft, and then comes crucial group or peer review, getting feedback early.
Okay.
That leads to a first revised draft, then maybe arranging information more logically, structuring the text, and doing some preliminary self-evaluation. This often cycles through to a second draft, more self-evaluation, editing, proofreading.
So multiple rounds.
Multiple rounds, potentially, before arriving at a finished draft. And finally, there's often a response to that final draft, maybe from the teacher or peers again. It's a continuous refinement, definitely not a one-shot deal.
Right, that makes sense. It feels more like how real writing happens.
It does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the same experts, Manchone and colleagues, they propose 3 general principles. These should guide the planning of any writing task in the EFL classroom.
Okay, what are those?
Principle 1. Students must learn to write to communicate. Seems obvious, but it's crucial. This is deeply rooted in the communicative approach, which at its heart prioritizes real-world communication. Authentic language use. This means students need to go beyond just words and sentences. They need to work with language at the discourse level. Meaning understanding how ideas connect to form a cohesive, coherent text, a whole message that clearly conveys what they want to say, not just isolated sentences.
Got it. Principle 2.
Principle 2. Students will need plenty of support. Writing is tough. It's a cognitively demanding activity, even in your native language, right?
Definitely.
So the amount and the specific type of support required will depend on a whole host of factors. Things like students' prior experience with writing, their attitudes towards it, class size, workload, their age, personality, even individual learning styles. It all plays a role. And it also hinges on the teacher's own beliefs and experience, and sometimes even institutional factors like how things are assessed.
Lots of variables there. Okay, and the third principle.
And principle 3, writing tasks must engage students in deep problem-solving behavior. Students are given a clear goal, communicate a specific idea, and they have to actively solve various difficulties to achieve it. Language problems, structure problems, content problems.
So it's not just filling in blanks.
Not at all. Teachers can make these goals transparent through things like clear rubrics, detailed instructions, maybe personal intervention and guidance. They also need to carefully consider the cognitive difficulty of the tasks they set. And here, they distinguish between 2 main types. First, pre-communicative writing tasks. These are more preparatory. They focus on building language skills needed for the main task.
Like exercises.
Yeah, things like linking sentences correctly, reading texts to recognize patterns, or even preparing for self-evaluation later on. Building blocks. And second, communicative writing tasks. These are the core activities. They involve producing a cohesive text that communicates one or more ideas effectively to an audience. The real deal.
Okay, that framework makes a lot of sense. Principles to guide the design. So it sounds like designing a writing task goes far, far beyond just giving a prompt like, write about your holiday. I don't know. Our source gives us several key considerations, doesn't it, to properly set students up for success. Which really makes sense given what you just said about support and problem solving.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you're designing or even just modifying a writing task, there are 7 crucial aspects to really keep in mind. It's like a checklist.
Let's go through them. What's the first one?
First, guided versus unguided instructions. You need to decide how much scaffolding to provide. So, for example, asking students to write a letter describing your summer holidays, that's fairly unguided. Or you could include guiding questions like, where did you go? What did you do there? Who are you with? That's much more guided.
And the choice depends on...
It largely depends on student proficiency levels and whether your main objective for that task is to foster creativity and independence or provide stronger support for idea generation.
Okay, makes sense. Number 2.
Second, where students do their writing, it's important to think about whether tasks happen in class or as homework. You probably want to dedicate class time to certain stages, especially those that really benefit from collaboration like pre-writing discussions or peer correction sessions. Even those preparatory, pre-communicative tasks can be really effective when done together in class.
Right, leveraging that group dynamic. Third,
Degree of collaboration. The writing process, especially if you're following a communicative approach, should ideally be collaborative at points. You can vary the grouping individual work, pairs, small groups, even large group brainstorming at different stages to achieve different learning goals. Mix it up.
flexibility there. Okay, fourth consideration.
Fourth, integrate other skills. Writing tasks rarely exist in a vacuum. They naturally lend themselves to incorporating other skills. Speaking and listening when discussing ideas, obviously. Reading when using model texts or maybe articles they need to respond to. Even videos can be fantastic prompts for writing. The key here, though, is always to be crystal clear about the main objective of the activity. Is it primarily a writing task or something else?
Good point. Don't lose focus. Number 5.
Fifth, awareness of what, how. This links back to the pre-writing stage. Through careful task conceptualization of planning before they start writing, students really need to grasp what they are writing, the purpose, the audience, the text type, and how they will go about producing it, their plan.
Clarity up front. 6th.
Sixth, audience. This is a big one. It's absolutely essential that students have a specific audience in mind. Why?
Because it changes everything.
Exactly. It directly influences their content choices, their language choices, their tone. Think about it. Describing your summer holidays would be completely different if you're writing to a friend from your country versus explaining it to a foreigner who knows nothing about the place.
Totally different.
Yeah. The audience also dictates the tone, should it be formal or informal. Sometimes the audience might even need to be inferred, like if they're writing an editorial for a local newspaper. They have to picture that reader.
Right. And the last one, number 7.
And seventh, purpose. As the linguist Diane Larson Freeman famously stated, true communication is purposeful. It has a reason. Knowing the purpose helps students make informed choices about their content and expression. So teachers should always design tasks with relevant and useful purposes for the students.
So not just writing for the sake of writing.
Ideally not. For example, changing a task from simply describe your summer holidays to persuade others to have the same summer holiday. That dramatically alters the language needed. You'd use persuasive language, maybe modal verbs like should or must. The Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, the CEFR, describes these broad communicative intentions like describing, explaining, instructing, persuading, informing as macro functions.
Macro functions.
Yeah. And it's important to give students practice with a variety of purposes to really exercise different language functions. You can even use those pre-communicative tasks to specifically practice language for a function, like maybe practicing modal verbs before they write the persuasive holiday piece. For instance, if a student says, "I'm so tired, I didn't sleep well last night," a teacher might guide them to practice the advising function by replying, you should probably go to bed early tonight, practicing that specific language chunk.
Gotcha. So purpose drives the language.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've designed the task, keeping all those 7 points in mind. This raises the next logical question, doesn't it?
It does. Once a task is thoughtfully designed, how does the actual writing process unfold? Step by step for the student.
Exactly. It's not just about the task itself, but that journey through it. And our source dives deep here, breaking it down into distinct stages, starting with what you hinted might be the most crucial one, pre-writing.
You know, I really think the pre-writing phase, that whole decision-making process before students even put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, it might just be the most pivotal moment in the entire journey. Teachers really need to carve out proper time for this and impress upon students just how vital it is. Don't skip it.
The planning stage.
Yeah. Our source uses a great analogy. Writing is like building a house. You absolutely need a plan. You need to consider your materials, visualize the end result before you start laying bricks. In this initial stage, students figure out not just what they want to write, but also how they're going to write it, the strategy.
Okay. And how is that structured?
Well, experts like Menchon and their colleagues, they suggest 3 key steps for this pre-writing stage. First, task conceptualization. This is where students form a clear mental picture of what the task actually demands. What are they being asked to do? This can happen individually, or better yet, in pairs, small groups, or as a whole class discussion, maybe with some teacher guidance.
Getting clear on the goal.
Exactly. Second, idea generation. This is simply thinking about the topic itself, brainstorming. It can be guided with prompts and questions from the teacher or be more open-ended. Things like brainstorming exercises, quick note-taking, creating mind maps, they're all excellent ways for students to explore different angles of the topic. Get ideas out.
Okay. Conceptualize, generate ideas, then.
Then third, planning. Once the overall goal is clear and they have some ideas, students plan the actual content and the organization of their text. They determine the main ideas, decide on their logical order, figure out how to link them coherently, always keeping that audience and purpose firmly in mind.
The blueprint for the house.
The blueprint, exactly. And this stage also naturally encourages personal planning, like thinking about how they'll manage their time for the task, which really fosters learner autonomy, taking control.
So once that solid foundation is laid, once the architect's plans are ready, then it's time for the actual construction, the writing itself.
Exactly. The writing stage, sometimes called drafting, it flows pretty seamlessly from a good pre-writing stage. Here, students shift their focus to actually crafting the text, how to engage readers from the start, draw them in, guide them through the arguments or narrative, and effectively conclude their ideas. A teacher can even demonstrate this, maybe composing part of a text from notes on the board, showing their own thought process, highlighting the difficulties and choices involved. That really humanizes the process.
Showing, not just telling.
Precisely. It's a cognitively challenging part, no doubt about it, especially when you're juggling ideas and doing it in the second language.
Yeah, I can imagine. And this focus on drafting and revision, this is really where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? This iterative refinement, as you called it, that's the main difference between the process and product approaches we talked about earlier.
It absolutely is.
It's all about getting to the best possible text through stages, not expecting or even aiming for a perfect first attempt.
Exactly right. Evaluation and revision aren't just tacked on at the end. They're truly essential to the entire writing process. They're woven in. Instead of that pressure for a perfect first product, students gradually improve their text through targeted feedback and focused error correction. And the research consistently shows that feedback is generally most effective when it's given at these intermediate stages during the process. And perhaps surprisingly to some, students actually report highly valuing error correction when it's done constructively and helps them improve.
Interesting. So they do want to know where they went wrong.
They often do, yes. Students typically write, on average, maybe 3 drafts in a process approach classroom. That implies at least 2 cycles of evaluation and revision built in. And the feedback, this is important, regardless of whether it comes from the teacher, a peer, or even self-assessment, it must genuinely motivate revision. It needs to demonstrate clear, actionable reasons for improvement, not just point out errors vaguely.
Okay, so let's break down these different forms of evaluation. First up, you mentioned self-evaluation. How does that work?
Right. Preliminary self-evaluation is often the very first step after a student finishes a rough draft. Get them to look at their own work first. Now, this can be challenging, especially for younger students or those just learning autonomy. It's a skill to develop.
Hard to see your mistakes sometimes.
It really is. So teachers must actively help. They can provide detailed objectives for the task, spell out clear expectations, maybe remind them of the defined target audience. Even just the simple act of reading through one's own work again, especially after taking a short break from it, helps students spot their own errors or awkward phrasing. Teachers can coach students by providing tools like simple checklists, Did I include? Is my main idea clear?
Right.
Or more detailed rubrics. This gradually helps them learn to effectively judge their own writing over time.
Building that internal editor. Okay. Next, teacher feedback. This is probably what most people think of first when they hand in a paper.
It usually is. And research offers many insights here too. In a communicative language teaching classroom, the thinking is that teachers should evaluate both accuracy and fluency, the mechanics and the message. So provide both general feedback on the overall communication strengths, weaknesses, organization, and also specific error correction where needed. Here's a useful tip from the research. Your effort in providing feedback should ideally be proportional to the student's effort in writing. If they've clearly worked hard, detailed feedback feels more motivating.
Acknowledge their effort.
Exactly. It makes a real difference to motivation. It's often advisable, practically, to first read the entire text just for content. Get the gist. What are the overall strengths and weaknesses? How's the organization? How well do they communicate their ideas? And then maybe on a second, quicker read, mark the necessary errors that impede communication or relate to current learning goals. Feedback must be specific, clearly stated, and sensitive to students' understanding and preferences. Vague comments aren't helpful. And finally, teachers should strive to get students to take revision seriously. It's not just about getting the feedback, but using it. Maybe providing a real audience for their revised work helps here, like publishing selected pieces on a school blog or sharing them in some meaningful way. Makes the revision feel purposeful.
Right, giving it a life beyond the grade. What about error correction specifically? You mentioned it's valued, but it can feel like a minefield for teachers deciding what and how much to correct.
It certainly can feel that way. Error correction definitely has its time and place. In the communicative classroom, the general principle is that errors are tolerated, even expected, during fluency-focused activities or early drafts, where the focus is on getting ideas down. Don't stifle them too early.
Okay.
So teachers might choose to focus mainly on broader feedback about content and organization for the first evaluation cycle, leaving more detailed error correction for later drafts when the ideas are more settled. When correcting, the key principles are competence, know what you're correcting, faithfulness, don't change the student's intended meaning, and consistency, use similar approaches over time. And critically, instead of feeling obliged to correct every single error, which can be overwhelming for everyone,
Discouraging, too.
very discouraging, you might strategically focus on one or two particular difficulties for a student in a given piece of writing. Maybe they're struggling with past tense, so you focus feedback there. As facilitators, the goal is to guide students to correct their own language, rather than the teacher simply changing their writing for them. That promotes learning.
How do you do that?
For example, instead of just fixing all the present tense verbs that should be past tense, you might write a comment like, check your verb tenses in this paragraph. Remember the story happened last week, prompting them to fix it. Or remember that the present continuous is used when describing simultaneous actions happening right now. Guiding, not just editing.
I see. More coaching.
Exactly. And a really practical, useful suggestion is to develop a marking code. Using symbols like SP for spelling, ER for grammar, maybe the caret symbol for a missing word.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
Right. They speed up the correction process for the teacher. They avoid that daunting sea of red ink on the page. They foster student autonomy because the student has to figure out the error type and fix it. And they quickly highlight recurring error patterns. Different types of errors might also be treated differently, a slip versus a systematic mistake. Be purposeful. And critically, feedback, especially error correction, should always be followed up by student revision. Always. Check that they've read it, understood it, and reflected on the corrections by actually changing the text.
Close the loop.
Close the loop. Otherwise, what's the point? And if common errors appear across several students, supplementing with a quick, targeted grammar mini lesson for the whole class can be incredibly effective.
Makes sense. Okay, one more type of evaluation. Peer review. This seems to fit perfectly with that collaborative, communicative spirit you've described.
It absolutely does. Peer review gives students a fantastic chance to work together, negotiate meaning, practice giving constructive feedback, and ultimately become stronger communicators themselves. They learn by reading and responding to others' work. However, let's be realistic. Students aren't trained teachers, so they need clear guidance and structure.
They can't just be let loose on each other's work.
Definitely not, initially anyway. You can involve them in creating a class marking code together, or model different types of constructive feedback. I like this part because, or I got a bit confused here, maybe you could explain. It's really essential that students take peer review seriously and understand its value for everyone involved. It's not just about finding fault. And while it's incredibly useful, peer review should probably never completely substitute teacher feedback. The teacher's expertise and broader perspective remain indispensable. It's a supplement, not a replacement.
Good point.
One final tip here. If students aren't proficient enough in English yet to give detailed feedback in English, encourage them to provide feedback in their mother tongue initially. That's better than no feedback. Then gradually scaffold them towards giving feedback in English as their language level improves. And our source actually provides a really robust content evaluation checklist. It's quite detailed, covering form, purpose and ideas, text structure, reader response like the beginning, the ending, clarity, areas needing expansion. Useful for teachers, but also adaptable for peer or self-evaluation.
That sounds very practical. Wow, okay. This deep dive has truly laid out a comprehensive roadmap, hasn't it, for teaching writing in the EFL classroom. We've gone from the foundational approaches product versus process, right through to the nuanced steps of task design and the critical iterative role of evaluation and revision.
Yeah, it's quite a journey. And what's truly fascinating, I think, is that when all these factors are thoughtfully considered and applied, the writing process isn't just about producing a text at the end. It becomes an incredibly powerful tool for gradually improving students' overall language proficiency, their accuracy, their fluency, and just as importantly, their confidence as writers. And this maybe raises an important question, something for everyone listening to consider. How might consciously applying some of these process principles, things like planning, drafting, actively seeking feedback, and embracing revision, how might applying those to your own native language writing reveal new pathways to clarity and impact, even if you're not an EFL learner yourself?
That's a great thought to leave everyone with. Applying these ideas beyond the EFL context, we really hope this deep dive has given you plenty of new insights to consider, whether you're a teacher, a learner, or just someone interested in how we master complex skills like writing. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.